And now I would like to invite Mr. Benett Theseira, President of the Eurasian Association of Singapore, on stage to give his speech.
Dear Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Mrs. Lee, on behalf of the Eurasian community and the Eurasian Association, I convey our heartfelt condolences to you and the Lee family on the passing of your father and our nation's first Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Mr. Lee was a close friend of the Eurasian community. Apart from Mr. E.W. Barker, who served as the first post-independence law minister, who was also a good friend of Mr. Lee, many other Eurasian forefathers worked closely with Mr. Lee and his pioneer team of cabinet ministers to establish various government institutions: the police force, military, education, civil service, and diplomatic service. Our pioneers such as Benjamin Shears, Kenneth Byrne, Maurice Baker, Stanley Stewart, George Bogas, Joe Consencio, Herman Hochstadt, and others played significant roles in the new government. They were attracted to serve by his visionary leadership and called to mission. Many also became his close friends. Many other Eurasians worked in the government service, supporting Mr. Lee and his team, and helped to build the foundations of the world-class civil service we have today. As many have said before me, perhaps one of Mr. Lee's greatest gifts to us was his firm belief in treating all races fairly and giving them a sense that Singapore belonged to all of us: Chinese, Malays, Indians, Eurasians, and others, and not any one race in particular. He was committed to the idea of building a model multiracial society, quite unlike what he'd seen in other countries or experienced as a student growing up in the UK or growing up in pre-independence Singapore. He was also a pragmatic person who was able to understand the challenges that minority groups face, and yet the value that diversity would bring to Singapore. He led us to pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language, or religion. And whilst he led us to become one Singaporean people, his philosophy was to do this not at the expense of our individual identities, resulting in the rich tapestry of cultures that makes the Singapore fabric of today. It is because of Mr. Lee and his strong sense of justice, meritocracy, and values that we have a cohesive and multi-ethnic society. It is a society where Singaporeans of all ethnicities don't just live and work happily together, but where we are able to discuss difficult and sensitive issues openly in a mature and constructive manner. This is an amazing achievement, especially when we look around and see the racial and religious strife in many other countries across the world. In the Eurasian community, while we grieve the demise of a loved one, it is often also a time for celebration, to celebrate the life and achievements of the one we've lost. So while we mourn for the loss of Mr. Lee, we should also remember to celebrate his greatest achievement and fruit of his lifelong passion, the success of Singapore. Much has been said in the earlier tributes and in the last few days in the media about the great contributions Mr. Lee made to Singapore. We saw this also in the video that was shown earlier. Whilst many of us, especially those who are older, know most of this, it is a useful reminder of the difficult start that Singapore had and the challenges that Mr. Lee and his pioneer team had to overcome. As many have said, he was a giant among men. It was his tremendous vision, capability, and determination that led us out of adversity and into building the successful nation that Singapore is today. For such a small country, Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew have an exceptionally strong brand, not just because we have been economically successful, but also because we are known for our integrity, the quality of our execution, and our innovation. Singapore has challenged the norm in so many areas: economic development, urban planning, business and social development, and made it a success. Whenever I travel or meet with foreign visitors, the respect that Singapore commands worldwide makes me tremendously proud to be a Singaporean. I'm sure this admiration is shared by the many tens of thousands, in fact, hundreds of thousands of Singaporeans who have been queuing for hours over the last few days to pay their respects to Mr. Lee. It is probably apt that we are now at the cusp of our 50 years of nationhood, a significant milestone to reflect on the past and celebrate the success of Singapore. And whilst we should celebrate the success in Mr. Lee's honor, the best tribute we can pay him is to come together as one Singaporean people to ensure his legacy is well preserved and commit to building on this success for future generations. There are many lessons we can learn from Mr. Lee, but there are two in particular that resonate with me. He was a determined and passionate leader, the embodiment of courage as he overcame much adversity. He taught us to be bold. He showed us that if we were diligent, did our homework, and worked hard, we could overcome any challenge. He also taught us about love, the great love and mutual respect he had for the late Mrs. Lee, as well as the love for his family. He treated Mrs. Lee more than his equal, his greatest ally and life partner. This was a side of Mr. Lee that most of us did not know until reading his memoirs. I was particularly touched to learn how in later years, when Mrs. Lee was ill and bedridden, Mr. Lee would make it a point to spend an hour or more every night with her, to read to her the news and her favorite books. And even when he was traveling overseas, he would read to her via webcam. Few of us can live up to the kind of love and devotion that Mr. Lee had for Mrs. Lee. So as we bid farewell to Mr. Lee, I hope that Prime Minister Lee and the Lee family will take comfort that this great man, a man of exceptional capability and intellect, is no longer shackled by his ailing physical body. He's now free to unite in spirit with Mrs. Lee, the love of his life, which I'm sure will make him happier than anything on us. On behalf of the Eurasian community, I thank Mr. Lee, Kuan, for all he's done for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Theseira.